Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Moving Markets Podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Dunyan. Once again, I promise we're going to get it together. We're going to get our schedules in sync. Kevin Hurley is out of town again this week. Kevin is usually my co-host on Moving Markets, and there's plenty to talk about. And I wish he was here to talk about that, but Kevin is on some vacation time with his family, and I think sometime in the next couple of weeks we're going to get our schedule synced up, and we'll be back to co-hosting. It seems like it's mostly been me, and a couple of occasions we've been together, and then he covered for me 1 week while I was gone. But that's all right. We're going to welcome him back as soon as he's able to be back with us. Let's dive right in. I've got a few things I want to talk about today. Moving markets is a reference to what has caused the markets to move, or what is moving the markets right now. Even though mostly we do this on a Monday afternoon, because mostly we want to talk to you about what we think is going to move the markets in the upcoming week. I'm going to be a little more true to the name of the podcast and talk to you a little bit about what happened last week. I was on the road last week on Friday. I was driving with my daughter and my son-in-law out to the place where they're going to be doing his residency. He just graduated med school at Yale. Congratulations, Mike. And now he's starting a 6-year residency, and we were driving across the country to get her settled in and moved in. Spent all day on the road at the end of last week, a day moving them into their new location, and then flying back over the weekend. So quite an exciting week. But while I was on the road on Friday, the stock market had a major move to the upside. Now, I'm going to try and explain just in case. And I think by now, anybody who follows this podcast has probably been watching things over the weekend. They probably watched things on Friday. They probably watched things today. And I'm going to regurgitate kind of an explanation, but I'm going to break it down and try and simplify it, and then tell you what I think it means for going into the next week or two. We'll be back on Monday and talk a lot about the Fed's meeting next week. I'm going to talk a little bit about it today, but so here's what happened. About an hour before the stock market opened on Friday, we got a jobs report. Now, this is not the unemployment report that comes out every Thursday morning. The unemployment report was pretty on line with what was expected. It came in about where people thought it was going to be. So not a lot happened on Thursday. If you were watching the stock market on Thursday, I think the three major indexes were up a little bit. Nothing spectacular, nothing crazy big. There was a lot of range on Thursday. The Dow started a little bit to the upside. It sold off and went down. It had a big rally, came back down to earth. When all was said and done, it wasn't a huge change on the day. Same thing with the NASDAQ and the S&P. The NASDAQ had a little bit better day on Thursday if you're looking at it purely from a percentage standpoint, but still not anything crazy, wild, over the top, spectacular. Then Friday came along, and you get this jobs number. Now this is the report that talks about the new jobs added to the economy, what sectors they're in. You get unemployment numbers, not just new unemployment claims, but actual unemployment numbers and percentages. Now, I got to start out by telling you that when this jobs number broke, the number was 339,000 jobs added in the month of May, compared to, I think it was either 180 or 190,000 that were expected. You're talking about a huge beat, almost double the number that was expected for new jobs added to the economy. There's a breakdown of which sectors the jobs were in. A lot of people thought that most of them would be in hospitality. A few more were in government, but a few more of them were in some higher paying jobs, some services jobs. The reason hospitality is a big deal, in case you're unaware, when you add a lot of jobs in hospitality, you're talking about waiters and waitresses in catering jobs at hotels. You're talking about housekeepers. You're talking about janitors. When you add a lot of hospitality jobs, you're in the cruise industry, you're in the airline industry, you're in the hotel industry, and the bulk of those, I mean, let's just be honest, the bulk of those jobs are lower paying jobs. That's not said out of any disrespect to anybody working in those jobs, but they are lower paying jobs. So that number wouldn't have had quite the jolt to it that it had if the majority of those jobs added had been in hospitality. But there were more government jobs added, and there were a few more private sector jobs that were slightly higher paying, a few more jobs in financials and in professional jobs that are a little higher up the food chain than the typical hospitality job. So that number came in absolutely huge. Now, one thing I want to point out here, I got a little sidetracked. This is what I was going to point out a couple seconds ago. Um, the the department that puts out these numbers, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, or Bureau of Labor Statistics, they have been off, not just by a little bit. They have been off by a lot on this monthly jobs number 15 out of the last 17 months. Have you heard a single word in the press about anybody getting fired from their job at the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Have you heard about anybody, any shakeup in the Bureau of Labor Statistics? You want to talk about the perfect example of an inefficient government office, a worthless government office, in my opinion, that cannot get it right. They are failing at a rate where anyone else in any other business anywhere in the world that was not government paid for, they'd be fired for being that wrong that often, with maybe the exception of your typical meteorologist. It's like weather reporters and government employees are the only people that can be wrong 90% of the time, over 90% of the time, and still have their job. So once again, they missed, and they missed by a big margin. Now, that number by itself should have caused a market sell-off. I'm going to explain to you why it didn't. And the reason it should have caused a market sell-off is that the Fed is raising rates to try and keep inflation down. And one of the reasons you raise rates is because it causes companies to lay people off. They don't have as much money to expand. It puts pressure on the job market. Not as many jobs, certainly not as many high-paying jobs. And when that happens, there's not as much demand. There's not as many people with big fat paychecks that are chasing after too few products. Rising inflation is the result of too many dollars chasing after too few products and services. And so the Fed, in raising interest rates to try and bring inflation down, part of that formula is the jobs market is going to take a hit. Well, when you get another month where the jobs being added is off the charts higher than expected, you would think that would instantly cause everyone to say, oh no, the Fed's going to have to stay aggressive. They're not going to curb inflation numbers with this kind of a hot jobs market. They want a cooling jobs market. Well, I don't understand why this happened, but with this report that came out with nearly double the number of new jobs added to the economy, the unemployment rate, the percentage rate of people unemployed, actually ticked up a little bit. It was expected to go up, but it was not expected to go up as much as it did. It was expected to come in, I think, I want to say around 3.5, up from 3.4, and instead it went up to 3.7. Now, by itself, that's not a big, huge number. That's still a relatively low unemployment number, although I could go off on a tangent about what total BS the unemployment number is to begin with. The unemployment number is a complete sham, complete charade, because it does not address the number of people who are still unemployed but no longer collecting unemployment benefits. I guarantee you our unemployment rate is way higher than the 3.7 number that came in last Friday, but it does not account for people who are underemployed, meaning they've taken another job to make ends meet, or they're still unemployed, but their unemployment benefits have run out. So they no longer count in that report as someone who is unemployed. The focus should be 100% on labor participation rates, which were still historically low in this report. But the fact that unemployment number ticked up a little bit completely held in check the big, huge job numbers. Now, I don't know how you reconcile the two. I don't know how you have that many jobs added and yet you have the unemployment number go up a little bit. That doesn't make sense to me, and it makes me think that when the numbers get revised, because every month the previous numbers on the employment report get revised, I have a feeling that 339,000 job number is going to get revised way down. I mean way down. I think it's going to be cut down to probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 225,000 when it gets revised. And it will get revised and it will come down, I can almost guarantee. But that rising unemployment number held in check the high new jobs number, and it gave people more hope that the Fed is not going to raise rates again when it meets next week. This is all speculation. It's absolute pure speculation. There was a fear that if there was a hot jobs number, that would increase the chances that the Fed was going to raise rates. That hot jobs number came out, but the higher unemployment number held it in check. And then I believe personally that the market reaction was way overdone. I think it created some excitement. I think there was a lot of automated trading, meaning that once certain numbers were triggered, there were computer algorithms making the next buy order take place. And I think that resulted in that huge up day that we had on Friday. And I think it makes more sense to me with today's sell-off. There was no new news. There was nothing to suggest that today things should have sold off, but all three major indexes were down, not by huge margins. The Dow was down a little over 0.5%. The S&P was down 0.2%, and the Nasdaq was almost flat today, 0.09% to the downside. But at one point in time today, all three of those indexes were up, and I think the overreaction of last Friday showed up a little bit in today's sell-off. Not a big sell-off, but I'm quite honestly, I'm expecting a little bit more sell-off tomorrow and through the rest of this week. Now, there's not, other than a couple of earnings reports and the possibility, and it's a very, very slim possibility, other than some earnings reports and the possibility of some new information about President Biden and this document that a couple of members of Congress were able to look at today. The FBI brought over a document that allegedly details a bribery scheme of then Vice President Joe Biden. And look, I think, unfortunately, the way the press is nowadays, and the way the media is so slanted, so hardcore to the liberal cause and to whoever the Democrat candidate is, the mainstream media is going to slant that way really, really hard. And everybody knows that. But even if this document gives all the details that would put any other person on this planet in jail, no questions asked, you're going to have Democrats and the media are going to spin it and say, oh, it's not as bad as it looks, or there's really nothing here. It's really not that big a deal. In fact, of the two people in Congress that got a look at it today, the one who is a Democrat, I can't remember, some butt clown from the East Coast who's hard, Denny Raskins or something like that. I mean, that's one of your many Democrats who blatantly, repeatedly lied. I mean, just flat out lied. And this is provable. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care if you hate me for what I just said because you can tell I'm politically conservative, or if you love me for what I just said, or if you think I'm off my rocker. It is proven. Multiple videos of him saying over and over again that they had concrete, solid evidence that Donald Trump had colluded with Russia. That has been busted. My Democrat friends out there, I hate to tell you, if you're still pounding that drum, that has been so completely and totally debunked. And people like Adam Schiff and this Raskins, butt clown, and I'm trying to be polite and not use swear words when I say that, people like him that over and over and over again said they had absolute irrefutable evidence that Trump had colluded were straight up lying. And you have the videotape and the audio to prove that they were lying. So I don't trust anything that this individual says. But already today, he and James Comer, who is the Republican, so you had a Democrat and a Republican from the House Intelligence or the House Oversight Committee. I can't remember which one, House Intelligence Committee, I believe. You had each of them look at this document that the FBI brought over to Capitol Hill. And already you've got Raskin saying, well, this is a closed investigation, so it's irrelevant. The Department of Justice has already cleared it and closed it. Well, that's a flat out lie as well, because some people in the Department of Justice have already come out and said on the record that this information was handed over by Bill Barr to the incoming group that came in with Biden, and it was not closed out at that time. So Raskins is lying again because he is a pathological liar. I'm sorry, that's just reality. That's a fact. And it's provable. He is a pathological liar. Put him right up there with Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. They're pathological liars. Anyways, so you've already got that spin taking place. You've got Comer saying, "Hey, this is a big deal. It's a credible source who said that he knows the details of how this bribe scandal took place." You've got Raskins trying to spin it and say there's nothing to see here, folks. The mainstream media is going to be on Raskin's side and continually say there's nothing to see here. But the reason I'm bringing this up, this podcast is more about the markets than it is about politics. It's okay. You can tell where my politics are. But the reason I'm bringing that up is if, and very small chance, because I think this is ultimately going to lead to more he said, she said, and possibly some more investigations, but it's not going to end up being anything conclusive. But if somehow that document got out in the public eye, which Comer is trying to make happen, he's trying to get that document available for the entire House of Representatives and Senate to see, and he's trying to get it out there for the public to see. That makes it harder for the media to spin it. It may still not have anything that's conclusive, but it could sure lay the foundation of some shenanigans that I believe personally have gone on. But that's I don't have facts to back that up. Anyway, if something broke on that this week, it could move the markets dramatically. Barring something like that, I don't believe there is anything that's going to happen this week that's really going to shake these markets. I think you're going to see a relatively flat week the rest of the week. And then next week, I think you'll see a big move to the upside or the downside on whatever the Fed decides to do. I am still in the camp of Jerome Powell probably raising rates again. The market is anticipating right now about 70% that he pauses and about 30% that they raise rates again. I'm in that 30% camp. I think they're going to raise rates again. We'll see in a couple weeks. We won't see next week because Kevin and I will talk about it again next week, but we'll see in a couple weeks if I'm right or not. So that's what I believe is going to happen. That's where I think we're at. I think you'll see a fairly flat week this week. You could see some big up days or down days, but I think they'll reverse each other. And at the end of the week, we'll end up in a spot not much different than we started the week at in this week's market. But again, some big revelatory news on the Biden situation could shake the markets, but I think it's less than a 5% chance that happens this week. Barring that, it'd have to be something unexpected on the geopolitical front. China would have to send some bombs into a Taiwan ship or say that they're ready to invade Taiwan. I mean, you'd almost have to see something like that happen geopolitically. Otherwise, it's going to be a relatively flat week. I think you'll see all three indexes stay range bound. From a technical standpoint, the S&P got right up to possibly moving out of bear market territory, and then it couldn't do it. It backed off and it ended up negative on the day and ended up below where that move out of bear market range would be. So I don't think it's going to break out of the bear market range this week. I think if it breaks out, it'll be on news next week of the Fed pausing rate increases or pausing rate hikes. And if the Fed raises rates next week, or if they pause and they say that this is a one-time pause and that they're likely to raise rates again in July, then I think you still have the S&P not being able to pull out of bear market territory. So we'll see if I'm right on any of that. That's what I have for you this week. Nothing else to report on. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see, hopefully with Kevin Hurley, we'll see you back here next week on the Moving Markets podcast. I forgot to mention this episode brought to you by Safe Option Strategies. Check us out at SOS Trades. SOS is for Safe Option Strategies. SOStrades.com. If you want to get on top of trading the markets and blow away the returns that the average investor and the average broker are getting for their clients, check us out at SOStrades.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.